For those of you who have never been to Tokyo, the city is bustling and busy up until midnight. Once midnight hits, the train system shuts down, so if you're on the train at 11:59 and it's about to turn midnight, the train will go to the next stop on its track, and then everyone has to get off. You spend many nights in Tokyo planning how late you can stay out and still get home without having to walk 3 to 4 stops distance. This night my friend and I messed up and ended up having to get off the Yamanote line, probably the most famous line in Tokyo, 4 stops before where we lived. Knowing only the vague direction we had to head home, east, we got off at a station at midnight and started walking. Around the corner from the station there was a businessman in his 30s or so, face down on the ground. Now in Japan it is not uncommon for people to get drunk and pass out in public places, so I didn't think anything of it and went up to him to ask him if he was okay. After asking him a few times if he was all right, he neither moved nor responded, and then I noticed that not only was he sprawled out on the ground, but his cell phone was also several feet away from his outstretched hand, as if he had just collapsed while on his phone. Not sure what to do, I looked to my friend for help. At that exact moment, a car came zooming down the narrow street and stopped at a grinding halt by us. The driver, a young Japanese guy, looked at us first, then looked at the man on the ground. He asked the man if he was all right and got no response. Then the situation hit him, and he saw me and my friend, 2 foreigners, standing over what could have been a dead man on the ground. He clearly got spooked and drove off without pushing the issue further. Based on how strange the situation was, and how impossible it would be to explain even in English and not look like we had hurt or killed the guy, my friend and I decided to get out of there as quickly as possible, and we took off, following the tracks as best we could to get home ASAP. About 20 minutes later, near the next station, who do we run into smoking a cigarette? The guy who had pulled up in the car next to us. He seemed visibly still shaken. He glanced at me, and I at him, and once he realized where he had saw me from, he put his cigarette out at inhuman speed, got in his car, and sped off. That was the last we saw of him. For years my friend and I would randomly discuss what had happened to the guy in the car, as well as if the guy in the street was actually dead or not. I wish I would have helped the guy on the ground, but I was a scared college student afraid of being put in Japanese jail. To start off, I had just finished my junior year in high school, and my Japanese language class was taking a trip to Japan to learn more about the language and culture. A friend of mine, and now girlfriend, who was unable to take Japanese that year asked to come along, and was allowed to by our teacher. The trip was 13 days, and covered a lot of ground in Japan. This friend, who we'll call Sarah, has a history of horrible headaches and migraines, but neither surfaced during our trip, except for one. We were in Kyoto, about to watch a performance of various types of Japanese theater, and had showed up a bit early. While we were in line to buy our tickets, Sarah started looking a bit distressed, and I asked her what was wrong. One of her headaches was coming on, and I had no clue what to do. I only knew it was going to get horrible. In an attempt to relieve her pain, I offered to take her to buy some coffee. Caffeine helps headaches. The great thing about Japan is that there are vending machines everywhere, and more often than not, they'll have hot and cold coffee cans in them. So I'm walking her down to the main street in the Gion district, looking left and right down alleys for one of these vending machines. After a few minutes, I see one in a shady-looking alleyway. As we get to the vending machine, I start pulling enough yen out of my pocket and have enough for 3 drinks. I was relatively hot, so I ended up buying a Coke for myself and 2 coffees for her, the other just in case it happens again. As she's picking up the cans from the vending area, I notice a man out of the corner of my eye, roughly 25 feet down. He gets up from the wall he was leaning on and starts making his way down towards us. Naturally, I shrug it off and assume he is going in one of the buildings in the alley. We start walking back to the theater house by means of the alleys because they were much quieter and Sarah was having a horrible headache by the time we got to the machine. The guy's still following us. No big deal. I'm sure he's got a house up here, I thought. I hadn't looked back for a while, and when I did, the guy was about 10 feet away from us. That's when I was able to get a good look at him before turning away. Black dress shirt, dark blue jeans, kind of a generic but unfriendly face, and his eyes were trained on Sarah. At this point, I got every shade of red alert going off in my head, but I have absolutely no clue what I would do should I have to intervene. I'm still holding my can of Coke in my hand, and that's about the only weapon I've got besides a knife in my backpack. So, I start to shake it pretty hard just in case. Should I have to use it then, it'll spray all over the guy's face and give us just enough time to hightail it back to the main road, where she wouldn't be in any danger. As I'm shaking the can, the guy advances closer and closer, and finally puts his hand on her shoulder. I flip the fuck out and point the can at the guy's face and open it in a manner of seconds, expecting it to shoot a stream of steady carbonated danger in the guy's face. Nope. Just kind of shot off a bit of foam and soda. The guy is stunned briefly, and that gives her enough time to escape his grip, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I just kind of swung the can in front of his face. About half of the can empties on the guy's face with open eyes. As he's doubling over in pain, which probably didn't last long, we hauled ass back to the main street and hurried back to the theater. Now, I have no clue what the guy's intentions were, but I'm just glad I was able to keep her out of danger. So I recently went on a trip with my family to Japan. Overall, I really enjoyed myself and thought it was a beautiful country. But one thing happened to me that kind of puts me off. I had recently got out of the hospital before we went on the trip. Recently meaning 2 days out of the hospital. I got my appendix removed and blood sucked out of my stomach. So as you can probably imagine, I was not in the best shape and very sore and incredibly fucking tired. My family had decided that they would go out and explore a temple, but I decided to stay back in the hotel because I was in too much pain and needed to rest. About 2-ish hours after my family had left, I decided I was hungry. Seeing a 7-Eleven out my hotel window, I decided to go and get something to eat because it wasn't too much of a walk and there was no room service or anything. So I set off on my small journey to get some food. After buying some kebab things and a strange cake, I went to the small seating area to sit and eat because I was too tired to walk back yet. It was just me and an older Japanese man sitting behind me. I felt someone touching my hair. I turned around. He started trying to tell me how beautiful my hair was, but his English was terrible, so I just smiled and said thank you. This was not uncommon, as I have strawberry blonde hair, and a lot of people in Japan seem to be fascinated with it. People always come up and touched it. I got back to eating. But soon after, the man moved next to me and started trying to talk to me again. To be completely honest, I sort of felt obliged to try and communicate because he seemed so cute and old and innocent. I just wanted to be nice. Bad idea. Shortly after, he decided to take a seat next to me. He starts saying short phrases in English. Incredibly sexual short phrases. His English seemed to have gotten better, and he continued to ask me for sex and tell me I was beautiful, and I was very uncomfortable at this point and got up and left the 7-Eleven. At this point, he decided it would be really cool and a fun idea to come outside with me. I was so tired and needed more pain medication, so at this point I just couldn't deal with his shit. I wanted to go back to the hotel and nap. I turned around and began cursing, telling him to leave me alone now. All of a sudden, he got this very angry look on his face and actually spat on me. I was so furious at this point that I turned around, ignored the pain in my stomach, and walked home so angrily I probably looked like a cartoon character. This is about something that happened to me when I was a baby, but my mom still counts it as one of the scariest events of her life. For a little backstory, both my parents were Marines stationed in Okinawa in the 80s. That's where they met, married, and where I was born. Once I was born, my mom opted for honorable discharge, but stayed in Okinawa with me as dependents. At the time, there was nothing available in base housing, so my parents had a small apartment out in town. Both of my parents still agree that their time in Japan was the best of their lives and had many friends, both Marines and Japanese. And according to them, I was a very popular baby with their Japanese friends, with my blonde hair and blue eyes. One night when I was about 4 months old, my dad had to go for a training exercise, leaving my mom and I alone for a week or more. My mom had no problem with this, as they lived in a very safe neighborhood. So safe that they had once witnessed a 4-year-old child walking home alone from his grandmother's house at 3 a.m., and no one thought anything of it. Well, my dad had been gone for a few days, and one night my mom said that a strange noise woke her up. She said it wasn't very loud, but the Corps had kind of programmed her into being a very light sleeper. Thinking that I had woken up for a night feeding, she came to my room. When she came to my open door, she found a strange Japanese man reaching into my crib, trying to pick me up. Now here's where I think the story starts to take a slight turn to comical in retrospect. According to my dad, the weather in Japan was extremely hot and extremely humid, even in the middle of night. So my mom had the habit of sleeping naked to avoid overheating. So my mom is standing in her apartment, naked, watching a strange man trying to pick up her infant in the middle of the night. And bless that woman, her first reaction was to pick up my dad's aluminum baseball bat and chase the man from the apartment, screaming in English and what little Japanese she knew. She rechecked all the locks and spent the rest of the night sleeping on the floor next to my crib. The next day, feeling a little less shaken, she told one of her closest Japanese friends. The woman told her that she needed to be very careful and watch over me because blonde babies sell for a lot of money on the Japanese black market. After that, my mom insisted that my crib be moved back into my parents' room, and they continued to live in the same apartment without incident until a family emergency forced my mom to come back stateside. This story always makes me chuckle a little, just imagining my mother, stark naked and screaming like a banshee, chasing some guy with a bat. But it's a little chilling to think what might have happened to me if she hadn't been such a light sleeper. Outstretched hand, as if he had just collapsed while on his phone. Not sure what to do, I looked to my friend for help. At that exact moment, a car came zooming down the narrow street and stopped at a grinding halt by us. The driver, a young Japanese guy, looked at us first, then looked at the man on the ground. He asked the man if he was all right and got no response, 30s or so, face down on the ground. Now in Japan it is not uncommon for people to get drunk and pass out in public places, so I didn't think anything of it and went up to him to ask him if he was okay. After asking him a few times if he was all right, he neither moved nor responded, and then I noticed that not only was he sprawled out on the ground, but his cell phone was also several feet away from his. Then the situation hit him, and he saw me and my friend, two foreigners, standing over what could have been a dead man on the ground. He clearly got spooked and drove off without pushing the issue further. Based on how strange the situation was, and how impossible it would be to explain even in English and not look like we had hurt or killed the guy, my friend and I decided to get out. For those of you who have never been to Tokyo, the city is bustling and busy up until midnight. Once midnight hits, the train system shuts down, so if you're on the train at 11:59 and it's about to turn midnight, the train will go to the next stop on its track, and then everyone has to get off. You spend many nights in Tokyo planning how late you can stay out and still get home without having to walk 3 to 4 stops distance. This night my friend and I messed up and ended up having to get off the Yamanote line, probably the most famous line in Tokyo, 4 stops before where we lived. Knowing only the vague direction we had to head home, east, we got off at a station at midnight and started walking. Around the corner from the station there was a businessman and his